This experience happened years ago as I went to a hospital to bring my friend's sister. She was visiting her sister, my friend, on holidays and suddenly fell ill. She had a high fever which immobilized her. It turns out she had a dengue fever and had to be taken to the hospital. Unfortunately, her sister wasn't there and asked me to take her to the hospital immediately. Of course, since I am the only one who's possible to do it at that time. When I reached her, she's already dressed and ready, but asleep, trying to fend off the pain away as she felt it on her every muscle. It was noon when we reached the hospital. Instantly, she went to the ICU to be given the infusion to hasten the hydration. All I can do is wait and be present. I guess small talk is unsuitable at that time, as she needs all the energy she has to recuperate. All she can do to show her gratitude is a big smile. It's comforting to see there's still a smile left in her. Then I felt that I have to leave her alone. So I went outside the ICU room and wandered around. The interior was big and majestic, like the lobby of a hotel from the 50s movies. The walls and the floors are matched, decorated in brown marble. The window was big enough that it didn't need any light source from any light bulb. The hospital itself was built long ago in the early 1920s. Of course, the majority of the building was renovated. People thought it such a shame though. It held such a national monument value, but sadly, only with minimal historical heritage of the old world, so to speak. Lots of people are scurrying around with worried look. Not a single person is there gazing the wondrous architect that have withstand through time. Only me. I took one of the brochures which explains the history of the hospital. It explains it went through numerous ordeals, especially after the World War II, which they have to keep admitting the injured during the war. Despite the harsh, problematic conditions of the nation, against all odds it went through, and years after years it flourishes to become one of the most prolific hospital. Then I remember, as I haven't asked her room number yet, where she'll stay for the night. As I ran across the lobby again, I noticed I've become the people with the worried look. I've become the person who stops admiring the wondrous architect. I guess that's what the hospital does to you eventually. I went to the ICU room, and yes, by the time I've spent wandering around, she's not there anymore. I asked one of the nurses. In her divided attention working with other patients, she told me to go back to the lobby and ask for her admittance log. There I go to the main lobby again, asking for her room. The nurse told me only her room number. Then I asked the precise building, as there are 5 separate buildings. Then she answered back, "The building you are heading, sir, is the old one." I checked the layout on the brochure which was held in my hand and looked at it. It was all the way in the back side of the hospital, right beside the parking tower. Then it occurs to me, I do indeed want to see the oldest one, since I am interested to observe the historical landmark. I walk around and spend 20 minutes getting lost, not willing to ask anyone where I am heading, because sincerely I wanted to know every corner of the hospital. Until I've just found out it's already dawn, coloring every wall, the floor, chair, and table bright orange. It's time, I think. It's time I stopped roaming around and stalling the time. And as I went to the right path to the old building, I realized how far it leads to it, until less and less people I see walking around. It was a beautiful sight though, where I can see a small patch of garden in front of the old building. The small garden was flooded of bright orange light as the sun showered its ray for the last time of the day. I walked slowly, observing the building. As I reached closer, all I could see was black steel bars caging the humming AC exhaust. The light of the front door was so bright, making the peripheral objects around it seem so dark. At this rate, I felt as if it was a prison spotlight centering me like a runaway prisoner. I reached the lobby and asked the patient's name. They answered her room number but told me to wait in the waiting room. Because of right now, she's not even there yet. She's still on the way, they told me. So there I go, and lightly regret that I should have spent more time wandering around. But since I am there, she could be there at any moment. I should be in the waiting room. Nobody was there in the waiting room, as it wasn't the visiting hours anymore. Then I look at the time. It's precisely 6 p.m. I guess this building is used for patients with no night visiting hours, as dengue's feverish phase occurs at night. As I sit on the old hard sofa, which is made of cracking synthetic leather, I looked outside the window and all I see was obscure purplish sights. The window in the waiting room was faced behind to the wall that separates the hospital and the outside. I looked around again just to spot any old historical object to get myself amazed. Yet, the only thing that amazed me was that no one noticed how the neon light bulb needed to be changed, as it gives a weak lighting, creating a somber ambience. In the waiting room of the old building, it felt so different from the main building. Lots of the furniture are tainted. There are no AC in the waiting room, and it felt so damp. I could almost feel the moist of the air on my skin as I went from the lobby to the waiting room. Then, curiosity took the best of me. From the waiting room, I walk around to see if there's anyone else, and to my surprise, there is. A brush of someone's departure through the hall and then to the stairs. As I walked to the stairs, I stopped and looked up the stairs. I paused to hear if anyone is on the second floor, but I failed to detect anyone as I walked upstairs so slowly, listening. Still, I haven't heard anyone. The humidity increased. Then, just when I reached the second floor, again, I saw a figure pass us by and went to her room. Surprisingly, that room was the room that was going to be used shortly by my friend's sister. And as I went inside, there was no one. I walked around the perimeter, sensing if there's anyone, as I walked so slow to hear any footsteps, to no avail. Then I waited at the second floor waiting room, hoping that she'll be here at any moment. And as I sit there, I lounge at the chair, stretching my legs in an attempt to straighten up my thoughts as I try to remember what was the mysterious figure looked like. At that time, its mysterious presence doesn't bother me. Rather, by some means, it intrigued me. Who is it? Then I closed my eyes to sweep away the thoughts of it, and in minutes I was caught in microsleep. It felt so bliss. The tiredness was lifted out of my shoulder, and as the evening silence cradled me, an image inside of my head emerged. Then I saw something, as if I was in trance and couldn't do anything, yet I could feel the surroundings, as if my body was caught in mid-dimensions. I could wake up, but I strongly felt to choose to stay. Suddenly, I could see a young girl through the walls as she lurked at me. Those eyes, those malevolent eyes. Then I figured out the walls that I've seen through is the room, that room that we're going to use tonight. And now, as she stand looking at me, she held out her arms, and suddenly I see flashes, taking me into a scene. It was blurry, but I could feel a fright, the terror of death, as I heard a heart-harrowing shriek. I could feel the fear puncturing into the vein. I could feel the unease and the distress, as it conveys the feelings of sorrow and betrayal. Such was the feeling that I never had in my lifetime. As I said before, as death enveloped me, I felt no choice but to succumb to the morning feeling. Am I dead? Then I feel a tight squeeze at my shoulder. That squeeze becomes tighter and shook me. I opened my eyes to see it was a nurse with a worrying face. A barrage of questions hurled at me as I tried to get rid of the faintness. It was already dark. Few lights are on. Behind the nurse was my friend's sister on a wheelchair looking at me. Then I told them I was there first when fallen asleep, waiting for them. The nurse told me to help her out to get settled into her room, and best if I could leave immediately. As I watched the room for the last time, I was worried that she would encounter what I've seen. What was it trying to do? As I finished helping her out, I showed my way out with deep dark thoughts on the way to the lobby. I couldn't help thinking if it was a premonition of what would happen to her, or a vision of a time to a past, a secret unrevealed for years. It was common, though, that death will occur in hospital, but never would anyone experience it and come back to tell about it, because death is a one-way trip, except until now. As I reached my studio, I couldn't help wondering what would happen to her. But as hours passes by, there isn't any news of her. No news is good news, I guess. She spent 2 days at the hospital, and as the day came that she would leave, I instantly volunteered myself to went and pick her up. I rushed to the old building and went to the room. It was 8 a.m. in the morning when we checked out. Surprisingly, the room emits such positivity. The sun rays filled the room as I see her rejuvenated. Her sister was there, thanking me for the trouble I went through few days ago, taking her in. I answered, it was no bother. As I looked around again at that room for the last time, I couldn't help myself by being astonished by how the aura of the room shifted. I wanted to ask the nurse just to give me a shade of explanation of what kind of bizarre incident I've been through. I wish she could tell me some sort of lore that she would happily tell of what has happened in this old building. Any kind of tell so that I could make a sense out of it. But I hold that thought and just smiled through the process checking out. The idea of hospital, where death and life coalesce, comforts me. Passed away and being born is as the same thing, as life is precious and valued by all of us, especially by me, who only just visited the hospital.